Hi, everyone. So we're going to get right into the story. Last time we read, Michael and Austin had gone to the aquarium for Michael's birthday. Taylor mysteriously canceled on them because she had a headache, but never bothered to tell Michael about it. And Michael had to find out through her friend, which is a little interesting. So let's read what happens next. They're at the aquarium now, and now they're on their way to Pizza Max for Michael's birthday. The pizzeria wasn't actually called Pizza Max. Its real name was Mac's Purple Big Pizza Parlor and Piano Pantry, which is as dumb as it is long, but they have awesome pizza. My mother and I ate there the first week we lived in Idaho, and a few weeks later when she asked me where I wanted to eat. I only remembered the Max part. The name stuck. We ordered 6 pieces of cheesy garlic bread, an extra large Max kitchen sink pizza, which has everything you could imagine on it except anchovies, gross, and a cold pitcher of root beer. While we were eating, my mom asked me, "What do Taylor's parents do?" Her dad is a police officer. Her mom works at a travel agency. My mom nodded. "She's a really nice girl. I hope she comes around again soon." "I hope she does too," I said. "Still, like your watch?" my mother asked. I think she just wanted to see me smile again. I held up my arm so she could see that I was wearing it. I love it. I could tell this made her happy. She looked into my eyes. "Are you feeling okay?" "Yeah," I said. "You're kind of quiet tonight." I was never very good at hiding things from my mother. I guess I just have a lot on my mind. "Are you still upset about Taylor?" I shrugged. "A little." She put her hand on my shoulder. "Things don't always go as planned, do they? But in the end, they seem to work out." "I suppose so," I said. I hoped so. We had been at Pizza Max for nearly an hour when Austin excused himself to go to the bathroom. My mother smiled at me, then slid around the vinyl seat of our booth to get closer. "Honey, what's wrong? You're really ticking." I slowly looked up at her. "Mr. Dahlstrom called me down to his office today." Her brow fell. "Oh, what happened?" "Nothing happened. I got offered a scholarship." A smile crossed her face. "What kind of scholarship?" "It's to this really prestigious school in California." Her smile grew even larger. "Michael, that's wonderful. What's the name of the school?" I was relieved to see her happy. "The Elgin Academy?" Her smile immediately vanished into a look of fear. "Did you say Elgin?" Her expression frightened me. "Yeah. In Pasadena?" "How did you know that?" I asked. She turned pale, like she was going to be sick. "Mom, what is it?" "We need to go," she said, her voice quivering. "We need to get Austin and leave now." This is interesting. So the mom knows more than we thought she knew about what happened with Michael. "Mom, what's wrong?" "I can't tell you here." She looked at me intensely, her eyes dark with fear. "Michael, there's more to this than you know. Your father." Just then, Austin returned. "I'm ready for another frosty mug of root beer," he said. I looked up at him. "We've got to go," I said. "Right now?" "Right now," my mother said. "Something's come up." It was dark outside when my mother paid the bill. We were walking out to the car when Austin said, "Wait, I forgot my jacket." "Hurry," my mom said to him. As he turned to run back inside, we continued walking to the car. My mother was unlocking our car door when a man appeared between our car and the truck next to it. His clothes were dirty and worn, and his face was partially cloaked in a dark gray hoodie. He said to my mother, "Excuse me, do you have $1?" My mother looked at him, then said, "Of course." My mother always helped others. She lifted her purse. When my mom's head was down, the man pulled a gun from the hoodie's pouch. "Just give me the purse." My mother dropped her keys on the ground. "Okay," she said, her voice pitched. "You can have it. You don't need the gun." "Shut up," he said. "Just give it to me and shut your mouth. If anyone screams, I shoot." "Don't talk to my mother like that," I said. He pointed the gun at me. He looked nervous and was shaking. "I'll shoot you first." "Please," my mother said. "Just take the money." She handed her purse to him. "Just take it. There's credit cards and cash. You can have all of it." He cautiously reached out and took the purse from her, the gun still shaking in his hand. He backed off again. "I want the car, too," he said. "Give me your keys and back away." I dropped the keys, my mother said. "They're right there. I'm going to pick them up." "You don't move," he said, pointing the gun at my mother's chest. "You," he said to me, "give me the keys." Uh-oh, that was a bad idea. Michael's probably going to shock him. I looked at him, then my mother. "Bring them to me now, and I won't shoot your mother." "Okay," I said. I crouched down and lifted the keys, then slowly walked toward him. About a yard away from him, I turned back and looked at my mother. "What are you doing?" he said angrily. "Give me the keys." My mother guessed what I was thinking. She shook her head. I looked back at the man. Maybe I had watched too many superhero movies, But if ever there was a moment to use my power, it was now. I could stop him from taking our car and my mother's purse. I was handing him a ring of metal. All I had to do was surge. I took another step forward, then slowly reached out with the keys. His hand shot out and grabbed them. The instant he touched the key ring, there was a loud snap and a yellow spark that briefly lit up everything around us. The man screamed out as he collapsed to the ground. I had never shocked anyone so hard before, and there was a pale mist of smoke in the air. The man wasn't moving, and for a moment I wondered if I had killed him. It seemed that time stood still. I looked at my mother, wondering how she'd react. She was staring at the man on the ground. The silence was broken by a deep voice. Well done, Michael. I quickly turned around. I have no idea where he came from, but a man was now standing just a few yards from us. He was sharply dressed in a tan suit with an orange silk tie. Even though it was dark, he wore thick-framed sunglasses. His hair, dark brown with sideburns, was nicely styled. He looked at the mugger, then back up at me and lightly clapped. Really? That was impressive. What was that? 900? 1,000 volts? Okay, pause. So that mugger must have been a plant, and this guy was trying to see if Michael, in fact, did have powers. I looked at my mother, then back at him anxiously. Who are you? My mother asked. A friend, Sharon. A friend and an admirer of Michael's and his gift. My mother and I exchanged glances. Yes, he said, smiling. I know all about it. As a matter of fact, I know more about it than you do. Just then the thief groaned, and I looked down at him. He was struggling just to lift his head. As I watched him, anger flooded through my body. If I had ever wondered if my electrical powers were somehow connected to my emotions, there was no doubt of it now, as I felt power surging through me like I had never felt before. I looked down at my hands. Electricity was sparking in blue arcs between my fingers, something I'd never experienced before. It's an emotional reaction, the man said. Fear, anger, hate. The powerful stuff causes your nervous system to react. It's peculiar, isn't it? Normal people respond with adrenaline, but special people like you react electrically. My mother put her hand on my arm. Michael, we need to go. I didn't move. How do you know all of this? I asked. The man took a step forward. Michael, we've been looking for you for a long, long time. Almost since you were born. Michael, my mom said. Why? I asked. To reunite you with the others. Others? You're not alone, Michael. There's more of your kind than you think, more than just your friend Taylor. His mention of Taylor startled me. I'd like to introduce you to some of them right now. Behind you is Zeus. Suddenly, a young man was standing next to my mother. He was good-looking but unkempt. He had long, greasy blonde hair and wore a Levi's jacket with the sleeves cut off and no shirt underneath. Even though he was only my age, he had a tattoo on his chest of a lightning bolt. My mother looked at him anxiously. And this is Nichelle. A young woman stepped up behind the man. She wore black clothing and dark, thick makeup, mostly black or dark purple, the way the goth kids do. Both kids looked about my age, though Zeus was taller than me. Zeus, show Mrs. Vey what you can do. He smiled darkly. Glad to. He lifted his hands and electricity flew from his fingers to my mother in blue-white strikes. My mother screamed and collapsed, just like the man I had just shocked. Mom! I dropped to the ground next to her, cradling her head in my arms. Why did you do that? I shouted. She'll be okay, the man said. It just took the wind out of her. My eyes darted back and forth between the three of them. Who are you? I'm your friend, the man said softly. Nichelle? The girl started toward me. As she approached, I noticed that the Zeus guy took a few steps back, as if he were afraid of her. As the girl neared me, I started to feel different. Everything was out of place. The man, the two kids, my mother on the ground. It was all like a bad dream. I felt weaker. The electricity stopped arcing between my fingers. Then I began to feel dizzy. I looked at the girl and she looked into my eyes with a strange, emotionless stare. I couldn't make sense of any of it, who these people were and why they were there. More importantly, what they wanted with us. With each step the girl took toward me, my dizziness increased. Then my head began to pound like a bass drum. I put my hand on my forehead as my vision began to blur. Take it easy on him, Nichelle, I heard the man say. He's not used to it. Suddenly I heard Austin's voice, blending into what seemed like a collage of other sounds. I looked down at my mother. She was still, but gazing at me. I saw her lips move, but I couldn't hear her. I couldn't hear anything other than the loud buzzing in my ear. I think she said, I love you. It seems like that's what she said. It's the last thing I remember before passing out. Okay, I'm going to pause because I have a crazy theory and there was absolutely no inferences to explain this. But I kind of think maybe the man in the tan suit with the orange tie could be Michael's father. I don't know. I just have a weird feeling. All right, chapter 16. Gone. When I woke, I was in bed with an aluminum side rails. I was lying beneath clean white sheets, and there was an IV taped to my arm. I felt as if I had been drained of all my energy, and every joint of my body ached, throbbing like a bad toothache. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust to the light above me. I groaned out as if expulsing a nightmare. Austin appeared at my side. Michael? I turned my head toward him. He was standing in front of closed blinds that glowed from the daylight behind them. Next to him were his mother and father. Austin's father was in charge of maintenance for the country's parks and recreation, so he was rarely home. I was surprised to also see him in the room. I looked around for my mother, but didn't see her. Where am I? My tongue stuck to my dry mouth, and it was difficult to speak. Honey, you're in the hospital, Mrs. List said. Her face was pinched with concern. How did I get here? Paramedics, Austin said. You passed out, Mrs. List said. The doctors were afraid you had a stroke. Where's my mother? Do you remember what happened? Mr. List asked. It hurt my head to think about it. There was a guy with a gun. Then this man with 2 kids. One of them shocked my mother. Shocked, Mr. List said. What do you mean? I looked at Austin. Did I dream that? He shrugged. I only saw the gunman. Is my mother okay? Austin didn't answer. I turned to Mr. and Mrs. List. She's okay, isn't she? Mrs. List walked closer and put her hand on mine. Her eyes were filled with tears. I have some bad news, honey. Your mother's gone. I looked at her blankly. What do you mean? The police believe she's been kidnapped, Mr. List said. My heart froze. Kidnapped? Why would someone kidnap her? We don't know. My body's pain was nothing compared to the agony I now felt. Tears filled my eyes. How could this have happened? My mother had spent her life protecting and caring for me, and now I had failed to protect her. I had let her down. Why couldn't they just have taken me? I wanted to fall asleep and wake up again in my own house, talking to my own mother. I wanted something to make sense. I wanted the nightmare to end. All right, guys. Well, have to wait until next time to see what happens. Bye.